This is Brewing Better Days. And now your host, Eric Hadley.
Forgive this at 32.
From the shadows to the spotlight. He's gone from classified intel with the CIA to fiery debates of Congress, and now he stands at the helm of one of America's most powerful advocacy groups. If you think you've seen it all, wait until you've heard from the man who's lived it. Welcome to the show, Bob Barr. Bob, how are you today?
Well, I'm doing fine. You might add also, Eric, that I went to school in such places as Baghdad, Iraq, and Tehran, Iran, and Lima, Peru, and places in between.
I've heard through our mutual friend and connection that you have tons of stories.
Well, I'm a lawyer, so some of them are true. The key is trying to figure out which ones.
Yeah, right. So Brewing Better Days, a coffee shop talk podcast. Obviously, I got to start the podcast off with a little question. Are you a coffee drinker yourself? And if so, how do you like to prepare your coffee?
I am an avid coffee drinker. I like very strong coffee with a fair amount of cream in it, but strong.
Outstanding. Do you tend to lean towards different roast levels, light roast, dark roast?
Dark roast. I'll get a cup that's about 2/3 full with espresso and add a little bit of coffee to it and then some cream. That's my concoction.
Outstanding. So, like I said, I've heard that you've had some amazing stories. Can you share the journey on how you got started in your career with the Central Intelligence Agency?
I was going to USC, University of Southern California, in my senior year, in the spring of that senior year, and I was thinking about what am I going to do after I get out of college? I don't have a job lined up. So I went by the campus recruitment office one day, and there was a little notice about the size of an index card on their bulletin board that the CIA was going to be interviewing. I thought, well, that would be interesting since I grew up overseas and have traveled a great deal and was about to get a degree in international relations. So I went in for an interview, and that then turned into a summer job as a summer intern for 2 years. I came back east from Southern Cal, went to grad school. This is a number of years before I went to law school, but started out as a summer intern at the agency and then did a year of grad school and then came back and did another year as a summer intern. And then when I graduated the next year, I came on full time as an analyst with the agency.
Very cool. In your tenure with the CIA, is that what you focused on, was being an analyst?
For a few years. Then I decided to go to law school, which I did at night, to Georgetown University Law School in Washington, D.C. So during the day, I would work out in McLean, Virginia, which is about a half an hour outside of D.C. in Virginia, work at the agency out there, then drive into D.C. after work and went to night law school. So I would spend about 3 hours, 5 nights a week going to law school until, 9 o'clock or so in the evening. Then I would drive back out to my apartment in Virginia, study for 3 or 4 hours, get up the next day, go to work, and do it all again.
Sounds like a determined individual back in the day. I love it.
Well, I'll tell you this, Eric, I couldn't do it nowadays, but I could do it 40 years ago.
It's funny you say that because when I started my career, I was sailing, doing 16-hour shifts, long days. I would do 3 weeks away, 3 weeks back home. Had a blast doing that, but I've said the same exact thing. I don't see myself being able to go back and do that anymore. That's for sure.
We move on.
Yes, exactly.
Our bodies stay behind and we move on, it seems.
The heart's there and the mind's there. It's the rest of the body. Looking back during your time in the CIA, what was one of the most memorable experiences?
Basically, my 8 years or so at the agency was split into 2 parts, well, actually 3. I spent the first year a little bit better in a training program to become familiar with the different parts of the agency, including both the public and the not public. And then I spent about 4 years as an analyst working Western Hemisphere matters, and then decided to go to law school at night. And an opportunity came up while I was still going to law school to switch over to the Legislative Counsel's office, which I was able to do, and became familiar with the Hill and working congressional matters while I finished law school. made a lot of good contacts. And then later on, of course, when I became active once again, years later in congressional matters, I had a fair background already in how Congress works.
So with all your training and everything that you went through with the CIA, what was something that you were able to take and move forward that served you in your next career as a lawyer?
Well, I think probably more than perhaps anything else was the fact that things are not always as they seem at first blush or on the surface. So it taught me to really dig down and sort of look behind the curtain, so to speak. And that's something that litigation lawyers do, certainly trial lawyers, as I've been over the years. You don't always take things at face value. And it also taught me to put myself in other people's shoes and see things from their perspective. As an analyst at the CIA, that was a very important perspective and way to do the work. And then certainly as an attorney as well.
Working within these organizations, obviously you've got leadership that you look up to. What were some of the key takeaways from leadership that influenced you as you moved forward in different roles and became yourself a leader?
Say what you can do and do what you say. I learned that watching some of the leaders at the agency, some of whom would not do that, but those that I really admired, both when I worked at the agency and then later as a U.S. attorney at the Department of Justice, I really came to admire people like George Bush when he headed the agency. He was very straightforward. If he said he would do something, he would do it. If he said he couldn't do it, there was a good reason for it. And then during my tenure as U.S. Attorney in Atlanta for the first couple of years, I worked under Ed Meese, who was a wonderful man, friend, Attorney General. Really came to admire the way he managed both the Department of Justice, this sprawling agency with hundreds and hundreds of lawyers, plus 93 different U.S. attorneys around the country. He taught me that it's very important, and something that I admire in other men and women, is an ability to follow what's going on with those people that you're leading, that are working under you, but not interfere. Ed Meese, he would always have his finger on the pulse of what was going on with all of these U.S. attorneys around the country and the Department of Justice and the White House, but he wouldn't interfere. But if you needed him, he knew what the situation was. It's one reason among a number that I really admire in him.
That's awesome. Looking back through my career, one of the takeaways that I loved from the experiences that I've had was some leaders would just get up there and dictate and tell you what to do. Some of the most impactful leaders for me were ones, their focus was on the people and how they took care of the people and led through example. That was something that I've taken away through my experience and am applying it through everything I'm doing with Got Your Six. And it's a great thing. It's saying that you're going to do something and actually accomplishing it. That's huge.
Yeah, and not over-promising. But Ed Meese was a great guy, a wonderful attorney general, and really a delight to work under.
With the vast experience that you've had from start to finish, I could only imagine all the different things that you've done that have made an impact for society. What are some of the things that you're most proud of that you've accomplished to make a difference within society?
Well, I'm not sure that I've made that much of a difference, but working in the Congress, for example, being able to support in a meaningful way through my work on the Judiciary Committee, the right to keep and bear arms that we enjoy, and which is guaranteed to us by our Second Amendment.
Yes.
I'm very, very proud of working in support of protecting the Second Amendment, which I did through the entire 8 years that I served in the Congress. And as a U.S. attorney here in Atlanta under Presidents Reagan and Bush 1, we handled a number of public corruption cases, some of which were very unpleasant to undertake, but in my view, needed to be done, prosecuting a sitting Republican congressman, for example. for perjury at one time, but being able to set a high standard for protecting the integrity of our political system as a U.S. attorney, I'm very proud of having been able to accomplish that for the 4 years that I served in that position.
How did you end up becoming president of the N.R.A.? Like, what impacted you? Is that something that as a kid you looked at? I mean, obviously you've said that in the past the Second Amendment rights are important to you. What led you to the N.R.A.?
That's a very interesting question because it's not sort of a pathway that one might think of. I grew up in all these places overseas and Baghdad and Tehran and Lima, Peru and Bogota, Colombia. And in none of those places did the citizens enjoy a right to keep and bear arms that was guaranteed to them. When I became active in politics here after I left the CIA and started practicing law here in Georgia, that was an important right to me, an important principle, something that I had seen firsthand, both growing up and in my travels overseas with the government, that it's a right that is not universally enjoyed, certainly. It was very important to me. And then when I decided to run for Congress back in 1994, because of my deep interest in and support for the Second Amendment and recognizing how unique we are really in the world, having that right guaranteed to us in our founding document, the Constitution, was a pillar of my running for office and being elected in 1994. The N.R.A. was a very strong supporter of mine back then. The opponent that I had, a Democrat, had voted for the Clinton gun ban, for example, and that was something that we reminded voters fairly regularly about. So then, of course, when I became a member of Congress in January of 1995, I stayed in touch with the N.R.A., obviously, and with other groups that were important to my district and helped with Second Amendment legislation while I was in the House.
I'm right there with you. With my career, I've traveled. I've been to 59 different countries. I've been all over the world, and I've had the unique opportunity to experience different cultures. Having seen what I've seen, I can tell you that hands down, America's the best place ever. And I fully agree and think that the reason America is so great is because of the Second Amendment. And thank you for taking the torch and fighting the fight for us all.
Oh, that document called the Constitution, and particularly the Bill of Rights, is something that far too many of our fellow citizens, take for granted. And, particularly those rights guaranteed to us as against government infringement in the Bill of Rights, to me is something that we should be really teaching our children and teaching adults constantly and reminding people constantly that these may be God-given rights that we have, but they are not guaranteed to us by our Lord. That's something that we have government to do, and that is to guarantee our rights, our liberty.
You have the general public, people that maybe aren't pro-Second Amendment, that have this persona, if you will. What are some of the common misconceptions about the N.R.A. that, if given the opportunity, you'd like to address with the general public to let them understand?
Let me do it this way. Several years ago, probably 15 years ago maybe, I was doing a program with the ACLU on privacy matters. And I forget where it was. It wasn't here in Atlanta. It was somewhere in the Midwest, I think it was. So there was a young lawyer from the ACLU that traveled with me from Atlanta to wherever it was in the Midwest. We took a flight there. And it just so happened when we landed, one of our hosts said, "Well, we're a little bit early for the program, but there's a group that's having a shooting exposition. Why don't we go by and watch them?" Well, I said, "Great." The young lawyer who was with me from the ACLU said, "Look, I've never held a gun in my life." But, he went with me, and we had the time so that he was able to sit down. He was a young man, probably in his late 20s. Said he'd never held a gun in his life, had no interest in it. But he sat down with somebody from this group, this Second Amendment group, took a crash course in safe, responsible handling of a firearm. went out on the range where they were having the competition and was able to shoot on the range responsibly for about an hour. And afterwards, he said, that's the most fun I've ever had as an adult. So, one of the misconceptions is that people who are not active with the N.R.A. or other Second Amendment groups, people who aren't themselves firearms owners or users, some of them tend to think that all of we folks in the N.R.A. are, knuckle-dragging Neanderthals, and all we want to do is go around and shoot things. That is a misconception that I've run into from time to time. What I encourage my friends and colleagues to do is not just be active in the N.R.A. yourself, but educate other people that you know, your friends and associates. Educate them as to what the N.R.A. is. Take them to a shooting range. It's well worth it to, pay for some of their ammo or their time on the range, because I've never had somebody that I've taken to a shooting range that didn't come away more impressed and more enjoyable than when they went in.
Absolutely. I think if we take the opportunity to, like, for example, my son, I've been teaching him the rules of gun safety since he was little, teaching him all these different things and making sure that he understands how to be safe, what the rules of safety are, how to, if he's at a friend's house and, they happen to like walk into the kitchen and there's a gun on the counter, what do you do? How do you address that? I think if we start young with the education side, that would solve a lot of the problems. But then the other part is it's a lot of fun to be able to take people to the gun range and give them that experience and that exposure. I think a lot of it might stem from just people being afraid because they've never had the experience before.
Well, not only because they've never had the experience or the opportunity, but because what they hear from much of the media and the news and newspapers is negative about firearms. Rarely do you see a story such as some of those that we highlighted when I was in the House on the Judiciary Committee at some hearings. Rarely do you see a story in the news media about somebody who used or had available a firearm to save themselves or to save their family or to save their house. You read about the negative stories, the people who use firearms in the commission of a crime, exposing, as you say, particularly young people there to safe and responsible firearms possession and usage is extremely important.
There's definitely been a shift. I'm from Texas, and I can remember when I was younger, you hear more of the stories of how a weapon was used to do something good, to protect somebody or to save a family. And just like you said, nowadays, it seems like all you ever see on social media or in the news is the negative connotation and the aspect of it. It's unfortunate.
It is, but it's something that is there. We're not going to change it, overnight. Hopefully over time we can. But that's an important part of our work with the N.R.A. and that all Second Amendment supporters need to be doing. We all need to be teachers to educate the public about the responsible, safe, important use of firearms and the right that is guaranteed us in the Constitution.
Are you a conservative patriot that loves God and country? Then we've got the most delicious coffee made just for you. Got Your Six Coffee supports veterans and first responders. We use the power of coffee to brew better days by making a difference in our community for these heroes. Got Your Six Coffee is freshly roasted and winning awards. Together, we raise our mugs and say thank you to those who have our backs. Order Got Your Six Coffee today.
With those challenges as president with the N.R.A., what have been some of the other challenges that you faced and how have you overcome them?
Probably, Eric, the most important challenge that we've overcome, not me, but we at the N.R.A., was winding down the litigation that had been brought against us by the New York Attorney General several years ago. The current New York Attorney General, a lady named Letitia James, she ran on a platform that included a promise to destroy the N.R.A. if she were elected to the position of Attorney General for the state of New York. And when she became Attorney General, she set out to do that by suing us. The legal hook that she was able to use is the fact that the N.R.A. is incorporated under New York's not-for-profit law. We have been since 1871. Now, a good question would be, hey, Barr, why didn't you get out of New York State a long time ago? That's a good question. We should have, but since we were incorporated under New York's not-for-profit law, that gave the New York Attorney General the legal ability to sue us, and it kept us in court up until December of last year for 4 years of litigation, uh, and extremely expensive. I'm just a Georgia lawyer. What I charge is pocket change to what a New York lawyer charges. But it was an existential threat. The New York Attorney General tried to seize our assets and revoke our charter and put us out of business. She failed at all of that. She didn't even get a monitor appointed, which she wanted to do. But it cost us 4 years and huge amounts of money. Being able to be at the helm of the N.R.A. When that case was finally resolved was a real milestone, a positive milestone. And that has freed up a lot of our ability to focus on our real mission, which is protecting the Second Amendment rights and educating people, training facilities and programs and so forth.
Now that you've had the opportunity to put that behind you, with you at the helm, what are your goals for the N.R.A. over the next couple of years?
Well, of course, the president of the N.R.A. serves a 1-year term under our bylaws. So my 1-year term will be up in late April. The president under the bylaws can serve one additional term if he or she is elected by the board of directors. The board of directors, which is 76 members large, elects the president each year and 2 vice presidents and the other officers. So my year will be up in late April. Here in Atlanta, we'll have our annual convention in my hometown of Atlanta. And my intention is to run for re-election. And if I am able to, I want to continue doing what I've tried to do, and that is to get the N.R.A. focused away from the being on the defense, which we were for 4 years with this New York Attorney General litigation, get us back completely on the offense so that our training programs are reinvigorated, our education programs are reinvigorated, and to get out there, myself and our Executive Vice President, Doug Hamlin, to get out around the country, meeting with friends of N.R.A. groups to let them know that not only is the N.R.A. back, but we're stronger than ever.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. As we were talking about earlier, to see that, that's amazing. I'm all for that. With Got Your Six Coffee Company, one of the things as I've started this venture 8 years ago with this grand idea that I was going to use 100% of the net profit from coffee sales to help first responder veteran healthcare professionals and their families. Made a lot of mistakes along the way. One of them was you can't grow your business when you're giving 100% of it away. I did great things to prove the mission, but I found myself several years into the situation with the realization that, just like I said, I can't grow the business when I'm giving it all away. So having to make that adjustment and to grow Got Your Six, part of that is growing the culture, leadership and the culture. What are some things that are important to you as far as being at the helm, the culture within the N.R.A.?
Bringing young people in. We have as I mentioned, a very large board of directors, 76 board members, 75 of which are elected every 3 years. We serve 3-year terms, so a third of us are elected every year. And then we have what's called the 76th director, which is elected every year. That was a special provision in our bylaws to allow Charlton Heston, the very famous actor who was president of the N.R.A. Back in the early 2000s, to serve several terms. We need more young people to be not just members of the N.R.A., but active in the N.R.A. There's nothing wrong with having seasoned folks like myself with a lot of gray hair on the board of directors, but we need young people. We need young people members. We need young people active with our committees, and we need younger people to join us on our board of directors. So improving the age by reducing the average age of NRA members and reducing the age of board members by bringing more young people in is, I think, one of the most important things to do to continue to protect the Second Amendment for me and for the NRA.
What values have shaped your beliefs about individual liberty and freedom?
Going back to, try not to repeat myself, but going back to our earlier discussion, having grown up in cultures and societies and countries where you don't have guaranteed individual liberties. More than anything else, Eric, I think that shaped my worldview early on, and why I am so protective of our individual rights that we have in this country, because I've seen, one, so many societies, so many countries around the world, you don't have those rights. And secondly, I've lived in a number of countries where they have them, but they are taken away. So what's really important to me is not just understanding our individual liberties as given to us by God and guaranteed us by the Constitution, but actively protecting those and defending those against the encroachment by government, which can be very, as you know, very insidious. Government is always looking, by definition, for ways to limit individual freedom. And the other side of that coin is to increase government power. It's a constant battle. Our founders understood it. Far too many of our fellow citizens have sort of become lazy about it and don't understand that. So educating about the value of individual liberties, our system of government set up to protect them, is extremely important, and something that I spend a great deal of time both thinking about and working on, both in, as an attorney and as president of the N.R.A.
You've brought up God a couple times, and it reminds me that Got Your Six Coffee Company is something that God put on my heart and has brought to me. And I can think back of 14 separate times where I have questioned God. Is this what you want me to do? I'm a stubborn country boy, and a lot of times I'll get hyper focused on something, and God will kind of like, I need you to look this way. And 14 different times I can point to different examples of where God has kind of answered prayers and had those moments where he's guided me. In your career, looking back, have you had any God moments where you were faced with an obstacle or a challenge, or you had a question about something and you just took the opportunity to pray about it and God answered your prayer?
Far more than your 14. And I do remember very distinctly. I can remember the church that I was in. While I was a member of Congress, I would visit different churches in my district in West Georgia. And the pastor in the middle of the service asked those members of the congregation who were there, who wished to come up and have hands laid on them to be forgiven. I went up. It's a church I'd never been in before in my life, and formed a circle with some other folks who were there, and knelt down, closed my eyes, and felt the hand of God through one of the pastors reach me. And it was very noticeable. I mean, I know that God was there and said, I hear you, I'm with you, I will help you if you turn to me.
It's crazy. I grew up going to church. My parents, it was a traditional thing, going to church every Sunday. That was something that always happened in my house. And then when I went to college, I would on occasion go to church. But then when I graduated from Maine Maritime Academy and I started sailing with Military Sealift Command, when you're on a ship, there's no church, right? On occasion, we might have somebody that would come on board, maybe who wanted to start up like a Bible study or something. But for the most part, for a period of probably 15 years, I didn't go to church. And then made a transition shoreside, had some life moments happen. It was just, I found myself in a dark place, and I had somebody invite me to church. And I too had one of those moments where I walked into church. It was completely different than what I grew up with, but it literally felt like the pastor was talking just to me. And at the end of the service, you had the altar call, and I went up, recommitted my life to Christ, and made the choice to get baptized. Just like you, I felt something on that day, and my life has been different ever since then.
Well, I mean, it's sometimes difficult to explain to people when you become born again, but if it happens to you, you know it. And I certainly did, and I will never forget that.
So the people that are out in the audience, the younger generation, you're talking about how the N.R.A. needs that youth. What advice would you give to somebody who's considering to follow in your footsteps?
I would tell them the N.R.A. is exciting, it is vibrant, and it is one of the best ways for a young person to actually have an impact, a positive impact for the United States of America. The right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental underpinning of our representative democracy, of our system of government, understanding that the government of the United States exists to protect individual liberty, and those liberties are laid out not comprehensively. That's not what our Constitution does. Those that are of prime importance, fundamental importance, are laid out as against government infringement in the Bill of Rights. And being aware of those and working with those, understanding them, and there is none of them other than perhaps some of those enumerated in the First Amendment are sufficiently tangible so anybody can understand them and view the importance of the right to keep and bear arms. If you understand our country's history, if you understand what our founders understood, living under the thumb of a tyrannical government, the British monarchy, and the blood that they had to shed, and the realization that ultimately it is protected by a rifle or a musket at the end of the day in the hands of every man. I mean, every man, every person. It's pretty easy then to get to young people and let them understand that. But just breaking through those barriers that we were talking about earlier, the television and the newspapers and radio and movies that constantly are harping on that small percentage of Americans and illegal aliens who use firearms unlawfully to harm or to injure or to steal. The truth is that the vast majority of those hundreds of millions of firearms in the hands of American citizens, law-abiding citizens, are what keeps these communities, our communities, and ultimately our country safe and free. Students are not, by and large, going to hear that in school. It's up to us as parents, as colleagues, and at the N.R.A. to teach that and make sure that our young people understand it.
Absolutely. You've been a part of major organizations and projects over your lifetime. How do you balance the work-life obligations? What advice do you have to others that are looking to get into the career fields that you've partaken in throughout your time?
Remember your family. That's extremely important. When I was up in the Congress, I stayed up in Washington. My wife and kids were here in Georgia, so I would be up in Washington usually 4 nights a week for those probably 40-something weeks that we would be in session each year. And I would call home every night that I was up there, spend a few minutes on the phone with my wife, say hi to the kids before they went to bed, or not if it was too late when we were in session to midnight or something. But just taking the time to remember your family, which is far more important than any job you'll ever have, I think is something that needs reminding. I need reminding of it. And I tried my best while I was up in Washington as a member of Congress to stay in close contact with my family.
Literally this morning doing my Bible study, and I teach this as the head of my household, but it was reviewed this morning that our priorities should be God, your wife, your kids, and then everything else. And that's, for me, that's been a struggle because trying to get an organization, start a company, get it off the ground, it requires a lot of effort. And when you take that, just that alone, it takes a lot of effort. But then when you do things like I did, you're trying to give 100% of the business away and make all these mistakes that have had impacts on the overall outcome, that has been a hard thing for me to really juggle and balance between, okay, I need to shut down, I have to spend time with my wife, I need to spend time in scripture with my relationship with God and prioritize my kids. And that's been a hard one for me to learn.
Yeah, but it's an important one. It's something, in politics, it's very easy to get so wrapped up in politics, particularly during the heat of a campaign. And of course, serving in the House, so you're constantly campaigning. It's not like the Senate where you have 6 years between your election cycles. It's every other year. So it's basically constant. And it's very easy to forget about your family and those around you, those personal relationships and your relationship with the Lord. And I've seen a lot of members of Congress who have fallen by the wayside, and it's largely because they have allowed themselves to become consumed with their job, with the congressional job. And as important as that is, it's not important with the other two, which is your relationship with your family and God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love soaking up knowledge. I grew up, it was different when I was growing up. My my parents didn't really have a high standard for us. So it was kind of, I was basically told I just had to make C's and didn't really start to build upon that foundation until I went to college, when I went to New Mexico Military Institute. And that first call for me, trying to adjust to being on my own and the structured military environment and academics and everything else. I mean, I did not do well my first semester, but I have built upon each and grown and increased my GPA, did all that stuff. All this being said, I've really kind of had this spark for knowledge and love reading books. I'm presuming that you've read tons of books in your time.
I enjoy reading.
What would be a book that you would recommend to me?
I don't know whether you've read it or not, but the most important book that I've read in my lifetime is Atlas Shrugged by N.R.A. It lays out her philosophy of individualism and rationalism. It really shaped my mind. I read it when I was in the middle of my college years, and it stayed with me ever since. Ayn Rand was she was areligious. She didn't believe in God, but the philosophy that is laid out in Atlas Shrugged, it's a long book. It's over 900 pages, if I remember, really is a blueprint for an individualistic oriented society that rewards individual labor and rewards innovation, as opposed to government, which more and more these days exists not to reward but to punish innovation. So it's a hard read, and as I say, I don't agree with every aspect of Ayn Rand's philosophy, but it's the most important book that I've read over the years, other than, of course, the scripture. But in terms of books written by the hand of man, it's the most important I've read.
I have not read that one. I'll have to look into that one. I thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So as we wrap this up, if my audience is interested in supporting you or following you, do you have social media channels? What's the best way that my audience can support you in your efforts?
I personally don't do a lot of social media, but I do have accounts, of course, through the N.R.A. and bobbarr.org. We have whatever the website designation is for that, www.bobbarr.org. I don't know, but it's not that hard to find if people just go to bobbarr.org. I write articles that appear in some of the conservative publications, townhall.com and the Daily Caller. So I've always enjoyed writing, going back to my high school days, and don't have time to do a lot of it now, but I do write articles fairly regularly, and we post those on our website as well.
Awesome. Well, Bob, one last question before we close. Who would be someone that you would recommend that I interview going forward?
Well, Ed Meese, but the former Attorney General, he's getting on in years and is probably difficult to get through to. But at the N.R.A., I would pick out any one of our board members, somebody like a Carol Frampton, for example, or a Sandy Froman would be very, very good guests to have on. Women, we have a lot of women on the N.R.A. board. We've had very strong women as presidents of the N.R.A. And I think it would be good to maybe get a different perspective. They might say that Bob Barr is full of hot air. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Here's the real story. I don't know. But it would be interesting.
Well, I appreciate that, because I'm actually excited. We are going to the N.R.A. convention this year. I'm going with Hucksworth Safety Company, and we actually went to SHOT Show with them. They have a podcast booth in their booth itself, and I've been tasked with running the podcast out of that. So I'll be reaching out to them to see if I can't maybe coordinate that for when I'm there at the convention.
Well, that'd be great. I'll look forward to seeing you in person. We at the N.R.A., there are only a handful of cities, Eric, that can accommodate our conventions nowadays. And Atlanta, my hometown, is one of them. So, we'll be holding it here in my hometown, and I'll look forward to seeing you.
Look forward to seeing you too, as well. Well, sir, thank you so much for taking the opportunity on this Friday afternoon. And any last minute tidbits you want to share with the audience before we get off?
The Second Amendment is important, but more important than that is our Lord, your relationship with our Lord, and your family. Don't forget your family.
Absolutely. Bob, this has been amazing. It's truly an honor to get a chance to interview you. Thank you again for your time, and hope you have a great weekend.
My pleasure, Eric. You take care.
You've been listening to Brewing Better Days. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on Instagram at Brewing Better Days and check the website at www.brewingbetterdays.com. Hey, life's hard, but it sure is easier with a nice cup of coffee. See you next time on Brewing Better Days.